But I think Cuba's the end. You know, all my life I've been hearing about the United States and Cuba. When will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation right now.
You just heard American dictator Donald J. Trump brag about potentially taking the entire country of Cuba now that it's been weakened by his deadly oil blockade. Now, he obviously didn't clarify what he meant by taking Cuba. Does he want to de facto control it and make it a U.S. territory, or are we talking 52nd state? Nobody really knows, but I say 52nd state and not 51st because he's already hinting that Venezuela will actually become the 51st state after he kidnapped their president and is now reportedly keeping him in solitary confinement, presumably until he lies and says that he stole the 2020 election for Democrats in order to fabricate the, quote, evidence that Trump needs to justify suspending the midterms or 2028 presidential election. But we're just talking two of the many Latin American countries that Trump is meddling with, because in actuality, he's waging a war in up to 17 different Latin American countries against the cartels specifically, who were emboldened by our country's failed war on drugs. And that's not including him bombing Nigeria, his genocide of Palestine, and of course, war with Iran. Oh, and now his State Department is threatening to withhold HIV funding to the country of Zambia if they don't let us plunder their minerals. So nobody is safe from our country's global terrorism and imperialism. And while Trump is pillaging other countries, the country that he's in charge of is currently in flames, both metaphorically and literally. I say this because Nebraska is currently experiencing the largest wildfires in its history thanks to climate change, which Trump doesn't believe in, of course. And a third of Americans are forced to skip meals or cut back on utilities in order to pay for health insurance thanks to its increasing prices due to the big bullshit bill and subsequent expiration of ACA subsidies that Republicans refused to renew. Not to mention the VDEM Institute's 2026 Democracy Report determined that the USA has officially lost its long-term status as a liberal democracy because of Donald Trump. And they state the speed with which American democracy is currently being dismantled is unprecedented in modern history, which isn't surprising given how Trump has completely dismantled the rule of law in this country. A 33-year-old New Jersey woman was just released from ICE detention after spending an entire year behind bars because she dared to participate in pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia University. So she spent a year there, even though she didn't commit a crime. In fact, she wasn't even charged with a crime. But, you know, the rule of law is gone. We don't have First Amendment protections or even Second Amendment protections if you're a trans person in this country, apparently, because the law and Constitution are what Donald Trump say they are these days, because he is, for all intents and purposes, a dictator. So Donald Trump is making America a worse place in virtually every conceivable way, but really it's the people who live in other countries who didn't have a say in our last election who are really suffering, like the people of Cuba, who Trump is currently starving intentionally as a means to facilitate regime change. And I don't say this lightly, but what he's doing to the Cuban people is going to go down as one of the most evil things about his legacy overall. He stopped all oil from getting into the country for 3 months now and demanded that the countries aligned with Cuba, like Brazil, not give them any oil or else. And the result has been utterly catastrophic to the 11 million people who live in Cuba. Food is becoming increasingly scarce, and basic tasks that we take for granted, like cooking, are now extremely difficult. Their hospital system has been utterly crippled by the blockade, seeing as how they lack the fuel that they need to operate fully, resulting in women giving birth in the dark in hospitals, putting all 32,000 pregnancies in Cuba at risk. And on top of that, thousands of dialysis patients are at risk of death if there isn't enough power to run the machines that they need to keep them alive. And the Cuban president warns that tens of thousands of people aren't getting the surgeries that they need, including lots of children, because of the oil blockade. And Cuba seemingly hit a breaking point on Monday when this happened.
Cuba's electrical grid has suffered a complete and total collapse. This is according to the country's power operator. It's the first nationwide blackout since the U.S. effectively shut off the flow of oil to Cuba.
That is insane. But thankfully, they did get the power back up and running the next morning. But it just goes to show you how effective Donald Trump has been at holding the entire Cuban population hostage simply because he doesn't like who their leader is. And that really is what this is about. He wants to be the president who can say, I finally did regime change in Cuba, because it makes him look like a big, tough, strong guy. And he's basically subjecting all Cubans to collective punishment until they rise up and overthrow their government because he doesn't like who their government is. Now, Daniel Montero, a Cuban filmmaker, told Democracy Now! That nobody's even thinking about overthrowing their government, obviously, because their primary concern right now is eating. That is the totality of their politics, food. Now, imagine if a different country did this to us, though, right? They said, we don't like the American government, which there's a lot of governments who don't like Trump. But they say, until Americans agree to rise up and overthrow their government, we're going to make them starve. How would we respond to that? It's just not realistic. First of all, because Americans wouldn't even know where to begin. We're going up against a military, which has the power to crush us. And also because, you can't expect millions of people to suddenly become pseudo-revolutionaries, especially on empty stomachs. It's just so childish to make that petulant demand, but that is Donald Trump's demand. He's willing to crush an entire fucking population if they don't do what he wants. And as Daniel Montero put it, it's essentially regime change through starvation.
We understand what this oil embargo means and what it has always met, what sanctions have always met. This is regime change through starvation. That is what they're trying to do. And right now with the oil blockade, conditions are worse than they ever have been. So, as a Cuban, as someone living here, all of my family is here. It is absolutely outrageous to listen to, Donald Trump and the administration in the United States saying that they're trying to help Cuba. They're trying to liberate Cuba because they don't articulate the price that they're asking people to pay. Sure, they're saying that they want freedom, they want democracy, they talk about all of these good things that are going to bring to the Cuban people, but they should really articulate the means to get there. The means to get there is the Cuban people suffering, is the Cuban people dying. I have no other way to describe it, as sanctions are literally killing people right now. Because the conditions are so bad. And this has absolutely everything to do with what the U.S. is doing to my country.
Yeah. So the situation is obviously bleak, and it begs the question, why would an entire population carry out the will of some foreign leader that's currently trying to kill them? It makes no sense, but it's the same thing that Donald Trump is doing in Iran. He's carpet bombing Tehran and bombing little girls in school under the pretense that he's doing that to help the people of Iran and giving them an opportunity to rise up and overthrow their government. But it doesn't fucking work that way. That's not how human beings respond, right? It's not the same thing as putting a gun to somebody's head and saying, do this for me. This is an entire population of people. They are not a monolith, and they are not going to succumb to the will of some foreign leader who doesn't give a fuck about them. They don't think the U.S. is the compassionate actor here while they're being starved or while bombs are being dropped on their head. And they all know that this is not about them. It's not about the people of Iran or Cuba. It never was. This is Trump trying to go down as the consequential president. He wants to be remembered as the president to finally overthrow Venezuela, Iran, and Cuba, because so many other presidents have talked about doing this, but none of them had the courage to do what he finally decided to do. So he's doing this to secure his legacy. And, he's going to get what he wants. He will definitely go down as a consequential president because he is very consequential, but history isn't going to view him kindly. He'll be remembered as the first unofficial American dictator and global terrorist who wreaked fucking havoc on the entire world. But to even get to a point where we can look back at this moment, we have to survive this moment first. And when I say we, I mostly mean people around the world. Hundreds of millions of people around the world threatened by our Hitlerian-ass dictator, they have to survive first in order to seek justice for those who didn't. And I wish that I could end on a more positive note, but I just can't. The situation is incredibly bleak. Americans decided that this demon should be the president because they stupidly thought that he would lower the cost of gas and eggs. So now the whole world has to suffer because of an election that they weren't able to participate in. You can argue perhaps that maybe Americans deserve to live with the consequences of our own actions, even those of us who didn't support him, just because this is our country and our election. But the people around the world who didn't have a say in our last election, they don't deserve any of the bullshit that the U.S. empire subjects them to. And it's so sad, but for what it's worth, I am so terribly sorry for all of the pain and suffering that my government causes and continues to cause. We truly are the greatest threat to international peace and stability, and it's not even close. But, you know, I don't blame anybody who doesn't want to forgive us for our crimes against humanity, because they're vast. But I am going to drop a link with information about the Nuestra America convoy in the description box if you want to know what's being done to help the people of Cuba and break the siege. Because if there's anything to feel hopeful about in times like this, you know, I guess it's that there's still people who are good-hearted, who are trying to do their best to make the world a better place. And, you know, so long as people like that exist, not all hope is lost. The fact that people still want to do good, that's something to hang on to, because once people like that just stop caring, that's really when all hope is gone. So I don't think that it's time to lose hope yet, but the situation is really bleak, and I don't think Americans should just turn away from what's happening in Cuba because we don't have to deal with the consequences of it. We need to understand that this is our government that is doing this. It's our tax dollars funding this, and we should care about that. And we should not just care about things that affect us personally. We should care about the impact that our country has on the world, because people don't deserve to suffer because of our imperialist government.